Have you ever felt like God stopped talking to you? You pray, but heaven seems silent. You cry out for direction, but get no response. You ask for clarity, but only hear emptiness. And you start to wonder, did I do something wrong? Is God mad at me? Has he abandoned me? The silence feels like absence, like God has checked out your story. But what if the silence isn't God's absence? What if it's a strategy? What if the times when you hear nothing from God are actually the times when he's doing his deepest work in you? What if silence isn't punishment, but preparation for something you can't see yet? Hannah's silence, when God hears what you can't say out loud. Hannah was barren. In her culture, that meant she was cursed, forgotten by God, worthless. Her husband's other wife, Peninnah, had children and used them as weapons to torment Hannah daily. 1 Samuel 1 verses 6 to 7 records. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Year after year, the pain compounded, the mockery continued, and Hannah went to the temple, broken and desperate. 1 Samuel 1 verse 10 says, "In her deep anguish Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. She prayed so intensely that Eli the priest thought she was drunk." Verse 13 described her prayer. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She was so broken that words failed. All she had was silent weeping before God. And here's what's remarkable. God heard her. Not because she prayed eloquently, not because she said the right words, but because God sees the prayers you can't articulate. He hears the groanings too deep for words. 1 Samuel 1 verses 19 to 20 records. Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." The Lord remembered her. During all those years of silence, all those years of unanswered prayers, all those years of feeling forgotten, God remembered. The silence wasn't his absence. It was his timing. He was working on something bigger than Hannah could see. Her son Samuel became one of Israel's greatest prophets, the one who anointed King David. God's silence wasn't neglect. It was preparation for a purpose Hannah couldn't have imagined. Right now, you might be in Hannah's position. You've been praying about something for years. The situation hasn't changed. The pain hasn't stopped, and you feel forgotten. But God is working even in your silence. He's not ignoring you. He's positioning you. The delay isn't denial. It's divine timing for something greater than what you're asking for. Joseph's prison, when God's silence builds what words can't. Joseph was forgotten in prison for years. He correctly interpreted the cupbearer's dream and asked for help. Genesis 40 verse 14 records Joseph saying, "But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." The cupbearer was restored to his position, just as Joseph predicted. But verse 23 delivers a crushing line. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 2 more years passed. 2 more years of silence. 2 more years of wondering if God had abandoned him in that prison. Joseph had been faithful in Potiphar's house, rewarded with false accusations. He'd been helpful to the cupbearer, rewarded with being forgotten. The silence must have been deafening. But here's what God was doing during those silent years. Genesis 41 verse 1 says, "When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream." God was waiting for Pharaoh's dream, not the cupbearer's dream, not the baker's dream, Pharaoh's dream, because interpreting Pharaoh's dream would put Joseph in position to save nations, not just escape prison. If the cupbearer had remembered Joseph immediately, Joseph would have been released as a former prisoner seeking favor. Instead, when Pharaoh's dream came and nobody could interpret it, the cupbearer suddenly remembered Joseph. Genesis 41 verses 9 to 13 records him telling Pharaoh about Joseph's gift. And Joseph went straight from prison to second in command of Egypt in one day. Genesis 41 verses 39 to 40 records Pharaoh's response after Joseph interpreted his dream. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." God's silence during those 2 years wasn't absence. It was positioning. If Joseph had been released when he wanted, he would have missed his purpose. The silence was building something his words could never accomplish. God was orchestrating circumstances Joseph couldn't see, aligning timing Joseph didn't understand, preparing promotion Joseph couldn't imagine. The silence you're experiencing right now might feel like God forgot you. But what if he's just waiting for the right dream, the right moment, the right door? What if your release is connected to timing you can't see yet? God's silence doesn't mean he's not working. It means he's working on something bigger than your immediate request. Lazarus's death, when delay reveals greater glory. Jesus received word that his close friend Lazarus was sick. Mary and Martha sent messengers saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick." They expected Jesus to drop everything and come immediately. But John 11 verse 6 records something shocking. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. He stayed 2 more days, intentionally. While Lazarus was dying, Jesus remained silent and distant. By the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been dead 4 days. Martha met Jesus with grief and frustration. John 11 verse 21 records her words, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She was right. If Jesus had come when they called, Lazarus wouldn't have died. Jesus could have prevented the death. But Jesus had a different plan. He told Martha in verse 23, "Your brother will rise again." Martha assumed he meant the resurrection at the end of time. But Jesus meant something far more immediate and powerful. John 11 verses 43 to 44 records what happened next. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, not just healed his sickness, raised him from death. Here's the crucial part. Jesus explained his delay in verse 15 when he said to his disciples, "For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe." In verse 45 records the result. Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Jesus' silence and delay wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he was planning something greater than healing. Healing would have impressed people, but resurrection changed everything. The silence produced greater glory than an immediate response ever could have. Right now, you might be praying for Jesus to heal something in your life. The silence feels cruel. You needed him to show up days ago, weeks ago, months ago. But what if God is silent because he's not just planning to heal what's sick, he's planning to resurrect what's dead? What if the delay is because God wants to do something so significant that people will have no doubt it was him? God's silence doesn't mean he doesn't care. It means he's preparing a miracle that requires perfect timing. The longer the silence, the greater the glory when God finally moves. Job's suffering, when God's silence tests your foundation. Job lost everything in one day. His children died. His wealth vanished. His health collapsed. And for the first 37 chapters of the book of Job, God is completely silent. Job cries out. He questions. He demands answers. His friends offer terrible theology, but God says nothing. Job 23 verses 8 to 9 captures his frustration. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. Job is desperately searching for God and finding only silence. But then, in Job 38, God finally speaks. And his response isn't what anyone expected. He doesn't explain Job's suffering. He doesn't apologize for the silence. Instead, he asks Job a series of questions that reveal something crucial. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. God spends 4 chapters reminding Job of his sovereignty, his power, his wisdom. And Job's response in chapter 42:2-3 is profound. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Job realized something during the silence. God doesn't owe him explanations. God's purposes are beyond human understanding. The silence wasn't punishment. It was a test of whether Job's faith was in God's blessings or in God himself. Job 42 verse 5 records his transformation. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. The silence produced something that prosperity never could: intimate knowledge of God. Job went from knowing about God to knowing God, and that only happened through the silence. Here's what God was doing. He was stripping away everything Job relied on except God himself. The wealth, the family, the health, the answers all removed. And in the silence, Job had to decide, is God enough even when I have nothing else? The silence revealed that Job's foundation was solid. You might be in a season where God has stripped away everything you relied on, and now even his voice seems gone. But God is testing your foundation. Are you serving God for what he gives you, or for who he is? The silence is revealing what your faith is built on. And when you come through this, you won't just know about God. You'll know God in a way that only silence can produce. Zechariah's muteness, when silence forces you to listen. Zechariah was a priest serving in the temple when an angel appeared with incredible news. Luke 1 verse 13 records the angel saying, do not be afraid, Zechariah, your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. This was the son who would become John the Baptist, the one who would prepare the way for Jesus. But Zechariah doubted. Verse 18 records his response. How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years. He asked for proof. He questioned God's promise, and the angel's response was immediate and severe. Luke 1 verses 19-20 records, the angel said to him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. Zechariah lost his voice. For 9 months, he couldn't speak. He could only listen. And here's what's significant. During those 9 months of forced silence, something changed in Zechariah. When his son was born, his relatives wanted to name him Zechariah after his father. But Elizabeth insisted on John. Luke 1 verses 63-64 records what happened next. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment he wrote, his name is John. Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. The first words out of Zechariah's mouth after 9 months of silence weren't complaints. They were praise. The silence had transformed him. When he could finally speak, Luke 1 verse 67 says, his father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied. The silence prepared him to speak prophetically. Sometimes God silences you because you need to stop talking and start listening. Zechariah was a priest. He was used to speaking for God. But his doubt revealed he needed to hear from God before he could speak for God. The silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It forced him to listen, to trust, to wait for God's timing. You might feel like God has silenced you right now. The opportunities dried up. The platform disappeared. The voice you once had seems gone. But what if God is forcing you into silence because you need to hear something you couldn't hear while you were speaking? What if the silence is preparing you to speak with greater authority later? The Israelites in Egypt, when silence spans generations. The book of Genesis ends with Joseph as second in command of Egypt and his entire family living in prosperity. Then Exodus 1 verse 8 delivers a chilling statement. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt, and the Israelites were enslaved for 400 years. For 100 years, generations lived and died in slavery, never seeing God's promise fulfilled. Genesis 15 verse 13 records that God told Abraham this would happen. Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. God knew, but he was silent. Exodus 2 verses 23 to 25 finally breaks the silence. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. God heard. God remembered. God was concerned. He wasn't absent during the 400 years. He was working on a timeline that required generations. Because when God finally moved, he didn't just free slaves. He created a nation. He revealed his character through the plagues. He established his covenant at Sinai. He showed his power in a way that shaped history forever. If God had delivered them after 40 years or 100 years, Egypt wouldn't have been as powerful, the deliverance wouldn't have been as dramatic, and the impact wouldn't have been as significant. The 400 years of silence were building toward a demonstration of God's power that would define Israel's identity forever. You might feel like your situation has gone on for too long. Years have passed. Nothing has changed. God seems silent. But what if the length of your wait is directly connected to the magnitude of your deliverance? What if God is building something so significant that it requires this much time? The silence isn't absence. It's preparation for a deliverance so powerful that generations will talk about it. Jesus in the garden, when heaven is silent in your darkest hour. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane experienced something most people don't think about, the silence of heaven. Luke 22 verses 42 to 44 records his prayer. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Jesus begged the Father to remove the cup of suffering. An angel came to strengthen him, but the cup remained. The answer was no, and on the cross, the silence became unbearable. Matthew 27 verse 46 records Jesus crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" For the first time in eternity, Jesus experienced separation from the Father. Heaven was silent. God turned his face away because Jesus was bearing the sin of the world. And in that moment of deepest darkness, when Jesus needed the Father most, he experienced silence. But here's what the silence accomplished. Romans 5 verse 8 says, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." The silence produced salvation. Jesus' suffering in the silence of God's absence purchased your redemption. The silence wasn't cruelty, it was the cost of your freedom. When you're in your darkest hour and heaven seems silent, remember Jesus in the garden. Remember him on the cross. He knows what it's like to cry out and hear nothing back. He understands the agony of God's silence, and he endured it so that you would never be truly alone. Hebrews 13 verse 5 promises, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." The silence you're experiencing isn't abandonment. It's the echo of the silence Jesus endured so you could have eternal relationship with God. And just as Jesus' silence produced resurrection and salvation, your silence is producing something eternal that you can't see yet. What God is doing when you hear nothing. God's silence doesn't mean he's absent. Hannah's silence prepared her for Samuel. Joseph's silence positioned him for Egypt. Lazarus' death revealed greater glory. Job's silence tested his foundation. Zechariah's muteness forced him to listen. Israel's 400 years built toward deliverance. Jesus' silence on the cross purchased salvation. Every moment of silence in your life is God working on something you can't see. He's aligning circumstances, preparing people, building character, positioning you for purpose. The silence isn't empty. It's full of divine activity that words can't explain and human understanding can't grasp. Romans 8 verses 26 to 28 explains it this way. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And He who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even when you can't pray, the Spirit intercedes. Even when you hear nothing, God is working. Even when you feel abandoned, He's positioning you for purpose. The silence isn't the end of the story, it's the middle. And the middle is where God does His deepest work. If this message encouraged you today, hit that like button and subscribe for more truth about faith, silence, and God's hidden work in your life. He hasn't forgotten you. He's just working in the silence.